Hello, welcome to episode 33 of Refining Rhetoric podcast. I'm your host, Robert Bortons. I'm excited to have my friend and recently Chief Academic Officer of Classical Conversations, Heather Shirley, and she'll be talking about her homeschooling journey. We'll discuss current events using the 15 tools of learning, and we'll wrap up with some crypto. Let's jump in.
Classical Conversation Studios presents Refining Rhetoric with CEO Robert Bortons, a podcast where faith, business, politics, and classical education meet. Join us as we use the classical tools of rhetoric to seek truth in every arena of life.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Refining Rhetoric. Today, my guest is Heather Shirley. If you're a Classical Conversations member, you know Heather Shirley's name. She has been with us for 19 years, working alongside my mom and others from the beginning almost. And she has overseen the development of a significant, if not all of our curriculum as the Chief Academic Officer. She has firsthand experience of leading local communities, tutoring foundations, and 6 years of essentials foundations and challenge 3 and doing challenge 4 as well. And unsurprisingly, she has a passion for classical learning, literature, and philosophy. And like many of the people that work at Classical Conversations, it might shock you, but she actually has her degree in mathematics and computer engineering, and she is currently pursuing her master's degrees in the humanities. So I'm excited to talk more about this contrast today because oftentimes in society we hear that STEM and classical learning don't combine. And of course, we reject that at Classical Conversations and on this podcast. But Heather lives with her husband, Ed, in Kernersville, North Carolina. They have 3 adult children who have all graduated from Challenge 4. Heather, welcome to the show.
No, it's good to be here, Robert. Thanks for having me. I look forward to the conversation today.
Given your background in mathematics and computer engineering, what is it that drew you to classical education, which is typically viewed as focusing strongly on the humanities like history and literature?
Well, what drew me to classical education was, a human being friend on a spin cycle. I was at a YMCA spin class, and my friend was homeschooling, and she said, we've got this kind of group that meets together, and we look at classical education. And I, said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I liked her. She was friendly. We ended up being good mom friends, and so I joined a CC community. So I was drawn in by a friend to a community, and through the community was introduced, of course, to your mom and some other families in those early years when our kids were younger. And we were introduced to Dorothy Sayers' essay on the lost tools of learning. And so that started, just a whole series of questions and ideas about education that made us kind of step back and evaluate our own education, and then look at how we're going to educate our kids, which meant we were going to probably have to re-educate ourselves just a little bit too. I don't know if that answered the question, but that's some of the drawing.
No, that's great. Here at Classical Conversations, we have a lot of individuals on our team who have engineering backgrounds. And so I think, all of us as homeschooling parents, we all see a lack or something that we didn't maybe pay attention to as much growing up. And it's always great to be able to redeem your own education as you seek to educate your own children. Can you talk a little bit about subjects like math and science and how they naturally fit into the classical model, which is often, like I said, perceived on focusing on the humanities? And what's it like studying STEM subjects, as they like to call them today, in a classical way?
Mm. So when we think about the way math and science are taught in the modern education world, the last couple hundred years, we've just had a lot of incredible increases in technology, and a lot of opportunities to make a lot of things more efficient, or to just do really incredible things, from the internet to a washing machine to a dishwasher. But anyway, so we have these really incredible advances, but at the same time, the thinking about the sciences and the mathematic portion, they are part of the classical tradition in that. yes, we're introduced to the idea of what they call the trivium, the grammar, the dialectic, and the rhetoric, and that being kind of the language art space, and the way we approach a subject. But the math and the science is really part of the classical tradition and something we call the quadrivium. And so the number, the geometry, the astronomy, the arithmetic, and the harmony is really. It's a full orbed education. Dorothy Sayers says we tend to see subjects as watertight bulkheads and we separate them, and we have to be careful because a subject should not just remain a subject. As you move forward, we see the integration, the universe, and how things sing together, how the stories tell us about the world and how nature tells us about the world. And all of these things teach us about humans and about God's creation and about our place in the world. So they're really meant to all go together. How do we study them? I think one thing that's important is to just develop a spirit of inquiry. What makes the planets, in the rhythms and the cycles and the seasons? We want the students to have a spirit of inquiry on why the heavens and the earth do some of the things that they do. What is it about the human body biologically, that we can learn? And then the sciences also find their place within the ethics of what humans should and shouldn't do, not just what they can do, what they have the power to do, but what humans should do. So I think they all sing together, but we do tend to think of them separately. So
Yeah, I think about that classic movie, Jurassic Park, and I think the
well, we
philosopher
a
says,
classic.
you know the scientists were so busy trying to figure out if they can do it, they never thought, should we do it? And, I didn't have a classical education really growing up despite, my mom founding the company. She didn't really, give it to it. We had some of it in high school, but not the grammar stage. And I remember in college, I roomed with a bunch of people who would go on to become doctors, and they were always memorizing things, using flashcards, and all of these classical tools that I now recognize that, in my household, and I'm sure in your household, we used on our younger students, and of course that continues up through middle school and high school, our Challenge 4 program, those good habits. So I saw firsthand, without knowing that's what it was, the classical methods being used by college students who are preparing to become, ER doctors and uh, in surgeons and go into other fields. So I definitely think that it's a misconception.
Mm. Yeah, the idea of memory, just like you're saying, is so significant for any subject that we enter into or any new endeavor we enter into. There are words and language in that community that you have to, put to memory, and you have to learn what they mean by those words. You enter the rugby world, and there's these words that they use to describe the sport. You enter the baking world, and they use words like fold that in and blend it and do this, and then you enter into the how to make a painting, you enter into how to play an instrument. And there's always words and relationships and rules and logic. And then there's, trying to imitate and practice back. And so I think all the subjects sing together that way. And so yeah, we don't toss out the flashcards and the memory when we get to be our age. It's just my flashcards, might be about a new recipe or something. So
Yeah, and probably printed a little bit larger text.
The after 50 eyes, yeah, or that, or I just have to give it up and put on the readers, which Ed and I are in this battle on keeping up with readers. But anyway, that's a whole nother subject.
One of the things I really appreciate about you is you're a clear and rational thinker, but as well, you've developed a clear communication style. So, did that come from your engineering background, or is that something that you've developed through your pursuit of lifelong learning?
Mm. Yeah, it's probably a both and. Growing up, I did take a math and science track, and so in doing that, the way the system was orchestrated was I could really test out of the literature classes. I could test out of history. I could test out of a lot of things, and so in some ways I did not get to practice the writing and the reading. I kind of avoided some of that, the writing and the reading in my early years. So I probably would have to weight it more on when we decided to homeschool. I knew I needed to read some books that I had avoided, and I knew that I needed to learn how to write. And writing is just kind of thinking in slow motion, and so I knew I needed those things. And one of the things I really appreciate about CC and Lee in particular, we would meet together and we'd do Andrew Pudawa videos and do our keyword outlines, and that just taught me, structure of language a bit more. It taught me more about expression. I know what an ly word is and an adverb and the parts of speech, more now, whereas you couldn't have in my 20s. I couldn't have told you that. So I was able to talk about language and maybe utilize language a little bit better, mostly because of educating my own kids and needing to reclaim that part of my education.
Now, were you not classically educated? So, when you joined classical conversations or entered in the world of classical education, I know you're talking about being in the spin class with your friend and kind of saying, "Well, she's nice, and I think she knows what she's doing." Uh, so, was it difficult for you to learn all the classical terminology and structure and concepts? And what advice would you give to parents who are maybe either thinking about joining classical conversations or maybe just wrapping up their first year in classical education?
I tend to think of classical education, especially Christian classical education, as kind of a journey and not necessarily an arrival finished point. And so, yes, entering into classical education, I knew there was a conversation going on about these ideas of how we learn. And Dorothy Sayers, I mean, the questions that she asks that get us moving. She's like, how do we use words in debates and not define them? How do students graduate with learning everything but how to learn? How do we cultivate students and for them a subject always remains a subject in a watertight bulkhead? So she just started asking these questions, and that was the entryway. So I mean, a lot of us, it's a very powerful essay, and a lot of us came to the beginning of our journey by reading that essay. And so she introduces us to some ideas that make us want to continue to pursue. Who did she read? Who was she reading? Who did she study with? And so probably one of the most important characteristics or qualities in this classical Christian journey is the humility to kind of sit and wait and to listen and to ask questions and to receive. I tell when I'm out speaking with other parents and especially moms, I talk about the parable of the Canaanite woman who goes to Jesus and says, "Listen, can I have some of what you're handing out?" And Jesus says, "Woman, this is for Israel. This isn't for you." And just that her feeling, maybe, possibly feeling outside of something that was really a group of people had this certain kind of conversation going on, and she would knocked on the door to see if she could be part of the conversation. And then Christ says, "This isn't really, this isn't the way it is." But then she turns around and says, "But even the dog takes the crumbs at the table." So she lowers herself, and you can go in all sorts of weird directions with that. But to me, the essence of the parable or the story is, um, she said, "I'll take what you can give me." And so that was my posture in this journey, as I just tried to put myself in places, in conversations, in front of books that I'm like, I have no idea what's being said here. I don't know what they're talking about, but I'll take what I can receive today. And so I think that posture, that internal posture, is probably one of the most important qualities, I would say. And then, yeah, if you're wrapping up your first year, just learn a little each year. We've designed the way we've designed our programs in our communities. We get together in the summer for a day or two. We look at science together one year. We look at math together one year. We do look at them, as subjects the way we're used to thinking about them. But then we always push toward integrating and helping seeing how things sing together, and that the world is a universe and not a multiverse. So if you've got a local practicum, I don't know when the show will be released, but we have summer practicums, one day practicums all over, the world. And those are, to me, where you're in person with people and you're talking about ideas and you're practicing something together. So
Yeah, it's that humility is one of our core values at classical conversations, and it's adults. I think the more you know that you don't know,
mm,
almost.
mhm,
Um,
I would agree.
yeah, so sometimes I think the best wisdom is knowing that you don't know, and then having the willingness to pursue it and to make mistakes on the way.
Mm.
And like you said, that journey, going on a journey by yourself, like going on a hike by yourself can be relaxing and nice, but it's always more enjoyable with a friend when you have someone to talk to, and you can point out animals together or plants and enjoy that as a family or a group. So I think that idea of going on a journey, but it's not a journey that you're on alone. It's a journey that you can enter into in a community with people who may have been on that road before, or maybe you've been on that part of the pathway before, and you can help out a neighbor. What do you say is the biggest thing or most helpful thing that you've done to become a better classical educator or homeschool parent yourself?
Probably, again, just putting myself in conversations and making time and space for conversations with, in particular, good books. You may have heard that when my kids were going through high school, those are some of very challenging years for those that love parents that love their children and children that do love their parents. But at the same time, there's a lot of sanctification being worked out, and so I tried to find spaces that we would read and it didn't feel like school. So my husband's a master griller, and we read. We would have some friends over from our CC community, and he's not necessarily a big reader, but my husband, but he's a great griller, and so hospitality wise. We would have folks over. He would grill along with another friend of ours, and we would just read an old book together out loud. One of our favorites was Cicero's On Friendship, because our kids were high school years. The questions about what is a friend, what is friendship, what is overbearing, what is a friend that is going to suck the life out of you, what is a friend that's going to kind of be able to rejoice when you rejoice. That's a true friend, and then mourn when you mourn. So, what does that look like? And they're, they were carving their own statues of, in some ways, of who they're going to become. And so we would, that's just one of the things I think we did well to do that during those years. I miss those times. We don't do them as much anymore, but just making a space where school didn't feel like school, like a bunch of worksheets or sitting in a desk or sitting still for 4 hours, looking at a math lesson or something. So we had moments like that too, but I really tried to make conversation spaces that were more about culture building and more about, yeah, community and culture building around a good book and good food.
Now, what are some resources perhaps for those parents out there that are on their journey that you would suggest maybe they pick up or listen to?
Well, I've probably got three key ideas. One would be, in CC's curriculum workshop, which I work closely with over the years. We have an exciting math program coming out called the Math Map, and this is where the quadrivium is trying to be manifested a little differently. A lot of folks are used to a bunch of different grade level math books, and they can't see the bigger picture of how math relates together in a quadrivium way. And this is going to be one of the beauties of what the Math Map brings, is that it shows you how the parts fit to the whole. And I'm super excited about it. It's going to take some time. It's going to take communication. It's going to take hitting our head up against a wall because of the way we've done math in the past. But to commit some things to memory, to be able to see the relationship of the natural world to the mathematical language of that thing in the world, and then to also transcend just what we see with our senses into the harmony, the time. Music is math in motion. There's just, the quadrivium has so many beauties to it. So we are going to have that curriculum resource available coming soon, and it's mostly, as far as I know, designed for our in-community folks only. So if you're listening to this and you're not in one of our communities, I'm sorry. For now, it's probably not going to be for you. But if you join one of our communities, you can check it out. And so I'm really excited about that new curriculum coming. The second thing that I would say that helps you grow. And again, I'm kind of giving CC exclusives here, and I apologize. I'll try to make my third one more general. The second one would be the classical learning cohort, and that's a very easy time commitment, couple times a month, for a few semesters, and you get to practice, just kind of helping students enter into Latin, enter into math, and how to think about assessment in a way that's kind of a human assessment and moves away from, necessarily just slapping a number on something, but really cultivating something to work on, and then also celebrating something that students do well. In this case, the students are the parents, the teachers reclaiming their own education. So I'd say the classical learning cohort, if you're in one of our communities, is one of the next steps. I'd already mentioned the practicums that are out there, and anyone can come to those. And then if you're a little bit further on the journey and you're entering into the middle school and high school years, then I would say if you can read a Plato dialogue one a year, I would highly encourage it. Start with the Symposium or the Mino. Those are in our Challenge 3 curriculum. So if you're a mom or a dad, you're doing pre-work if your kids are young. But in that, there's just a way of thinking, a spirit of inquiry, and a way of knowing that goes beyond just kind of a laboratory way of knowing. There's ways that humans know things, and we're made in His image, and we can the way we approach knowing things is bigger than maybe some of what we've been able to experience in our own education, and that maybe classical Christian education can open back up to us.
Are there any classical education books that you've read recently that you've really enjoyed?
Well, well, I think one of the things that classical education opens up with the humanities side is it asks questions about what's true, good, and beautiful, and so trying to really orient yourself to not just what's efficient, not just what works, and not just what I can do, which I think we were just talking about a little while ago, um, but what ought I do? What is true? What is good? And what is beautiful? And so I've been really thinking and seeking more on those because that's how we orient ourselves in the world. Is we act on something that we either think is true or good, or the beauty moves us. So the book I'm reading right now is called The Ethics of Beauty, and it's really challenging and pushing me in how I think about truth, goodness, and beauty. So it's a tome of a book. So I'm taking my time. I've committed to it for a year, so I'm not in a hurry. But yeah, I'm thinking a lot on beauty lately.
Mm, yes, it's great. There's so much in our world now, especially that yeah, just the world thinks it's beautiful, but I don't see it. and sometimes that's maybe what our an argument that we're actually having, but no one realizes it is what is really beautiful, what is true. That's great. So now that you've come to the end of, you've said you got your end of your journey. You've had 3 children graduate from Challenge 4, and I know they're all doing wonderful things. One in the military, one working in sales for a large company that has a product that we use in our own home, and then of course one working for Classical Conversations. So, what do you see next for you? What do you have on your horizon?
Yeah, I'll continue to kind of support the CC world. I think we've talked about maybe getting out and doing some director workshops and doing some prospective director workshops, folks that might consider directing a community, and maybe they just want to see and talk and have a space to think about what that looks like. And so I think I'll work with different teams to see what might work there, and then I mentor, very intentionally about 12 adults every year, and we read books together, and we write together, and we think and have conversations about education, about sanctification, about just kind of growing in our own learning, and so I'll keep doing that. I am, my oldest also is in his 4th year of tutoring Challenge 4, so I do try to peek in every once in a while and just say, "Let me come in and take a look around," but I have to respect the space, so I try to get in, especially during senior thesis time. I love to hear what the students are thinking about, so that's my life's pretty
Yeah,
simple.
if you ever have a chance to go see senior thesis, you don't have to be in Classical Conversations. You can try to ask if you can be a judge or just sit in on it. I mean, those are amazing opportunities to just see the culmination of all the effort from the families and the students from their Classical Conversations journey. Heather, it's been great to have you on today. I know that people are going to be super excited to hear you speaking, and I know that we're gonna try to get you out there to talk to more classical homeschoolers and just continue to be on the podcast. I know you were on the Blessings with Motherhood, so I think that episode's not out yet. It should be soon, and I'm sure you'll continue to just bless those around you and just strengthen the classical education movement. So, is there a website or any social media or anything if someone wants to connect with you, or just best through the classical conversation platform?
Yeah, I'm off and on. Yeah, I'm off and on social media. I do have an Instagram account, and I do post things from readings and fun things there. I'll post, of course, this podcast too. Um, and then I do have a blog, but I don't keep it up. But it's sanctifiedwoman.com. And the Lord gave me that name years ago just to figure out what the heck does it mean to be a woman set apart. So it's my wrestling journey there. I don't keep it up to date, but it does have some, little bit of ideas there. So maybe one day I'll pick it up. We'll see.
Well, that's wonderful. Go check out her blog that has not been updated for a little while, but maybe it will be soon. And check out what Heather's reading on her Instagram. And if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to share it. Heather, thank you for joining today.
Thanks, Robert. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
So today we're going to practice our 15 tools of learning, and we're going to look at an article that was on CNBC. You can find it in the show notes if you want to read the article yourself, but it's related to the current event that you may have heard in the news that the U.S. will hit its debt limit on Thursday. That was January 19th. And Janet Yellen is warning Congress, and she's starting to take steps to avoid default. And so they are taking, as Janet Yellen said, taking extraordinary measures to prevent the United States from defaulting on its obligation. And so we're going to look at some of these tools of learning. So the first thing that we would want to do is look at the 5 core habits of grammar and naming or knowing the appropriate word. And for that is really the debt limit. And so what is the debt limit? It is the amount of money the U.S. can go into debt based on what the Congress has created by statutory decree. And so that was in December of 2021. Congress increased the federal debt limit to about $31.4 trillion. So if you think about it like a credit card, you have your limit and you can pay it down. If you get cash in, you can pay it down, and that allows you to bring it back up. Or you can say, okay, well, this bill's not due for 30 days. This one's due in 10. Let me pay the one that's due in 10 first. And so they said that basically they can use extraordinary measures to push off default until, I believe it is June, is what they're currently saying. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, and House Democrat Leader Rep. Hakeem Jeffries of New York, in a joint statement said, Congress must act on legislation to prevent a disastrous default, meet our obligations, and protect the full faith and credit of the United States. Now, we look at the 5 common topics of dialectic and circumstance, discover what else is happening at the same time in other places. So I just reading from the article said December of 2021, they increased the federal debt limit to about $31.4 trillion. And at that same time, they passed the omnibus bill, which again, we talked about that in a previous episode of, I think like $1.7 trillion worth of spending. So the previous Congress at that time clearly would have known that the debt limit and the spending that they authorized were on a collision course. So you can see through the article, and it's not just one party or other. I mean, both of them, in my opinion, are to blame, but both of them blaming the past. So Janet Yellen, and this is the 5 canons of rhetoric memory. Janet Yellen said, increasing or suspending the debt limit does not authorize new spending commitments or cost taxpayers money. It simply allows the government to finance existing legal obligations that Congress and presidents of both parties have made in the past. Now, not an inaccurate statement, But the nice thing about that statement is you can probably go back to every other time that we've ever hit the debt limit and they say the same thing. And they plan on saying the exact same thing every single time in the future because you can see what they're doing is blaming the past. It says existing obligations that Congress and presidents of both parties have made in the past. So you can see they're using rhetoric to push the blame somewhere else. And again, this isn't one party that does this, it's both of them. So we're not being political on this specific issue, other than to say both of them have gotten us into this mess, and we will see if anyone has the gumption to try to get us out. But you can see there how 3 of those 15 tools of learning that we use can be called out in articles as you read them. So again, feel free to check out that article. And anytime you're reading the news, think about these 15 habits and how you can try to figure out what's actually going on in the world. Before getting on with the show, I want to tell you about the Museum of the Bible. If you haven't been, you have to go. It's an absolute must for your next family's vacation to our nation's capital. It's a large museum in Washington, D.C., and has traveling exhibits from around the world. And Museum of the Bible brings visitors through interactive, immersive experience using cutting-edge technology to tell the impact, narrative, and history of the scriptures. You'll find a lot that relates to the CC curriculum in there. And great news for our CC families, you can save on tickets. Just log in to CC Connected to find your Museum of the Bible discount code to apply during checkout. Visit www.museumofthebible.org for more information. Now back to the show. I'm excited to be talking to you about crypto today. Will, who normally hosts this segment, as we've expanded our offering to weekly, he and I are going to be tag teaming this. So you'll be hearing some of my voice. Just like Will, this is not financial advice. I am not an advisor. I don't have an accounting degree. So talk to the professionals. But we are trying to educate you on crypto, what it is, and how you can use it. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about how crypto can be used to save money. Let me give you a little bit of background on this as far as fees and the current state of moving and accepting payments and moving money around in the United States and in the world. So, for small businesses, and if you take credit cards, you pay a credit card fee. And of course, as the economy's gotten worse, you may start seeing that fee passed on in your tickets, your receipts when you go out to eat. But typically, you have a charge fee that's like 50 cents, could be a little bit more, a little bit less than that. And then there's a percent fee, usually around 2.6%. Again, could be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. And so if you spend $10 somewhere, 3% of that's going to the credit card, which to me makes it so that a lot of small businesses actually pretty much just work for the credit card companies because of how much they are paying them versus how much profit they might be making at the end of the year. Organization that you might be familiar with called Western Union is a company that helps move money around the world. And so if you want to send money overseas, a lot of times you'll do that through Western Union. The fees are quite high, much higher than credit card fees. And a lot of times, Western Union is how those who might be from a second or third world country, they go to a first world country to work, and then they send the money that they earn back home to feed their family, house them, educate them where they're from. And when that happens, Western Union takes a big chunk of that money. I don't know all the services Western Union makes or how they get all of their annual revenue, so I don't want you to hear that this number that I'm about to tell you is just from those transfer fees. I would suggest that probably a significant portion of it is. But they collected $4.6 billion in revenue in 2022. So you can imagine that maybe this migrant worker maybe has $200 to send home. Well, Western Union is taking $20, $30 of that, And then their family back at home, it's not like there's a Western Union on the block. They typically have to get a bus ticket or walk to a big city and then get to the Western Union to collect those fees. So maybe you send $200 home, but by the time you pay your Western Union fees and the individual pays for a bus ticket to pick it up, well, they're only receiving 100, 120, $130 after all the work and effort is made to get it done. And a lot of times it takes a whole day for a family member to get to the Western Union. It's not like here in the United States where you just hop in your car and maybe drive 5 minutes down the road and there's one in your local grocery store. So why is this important to know? Well, there's a service called Strike, and it allows you to transfer money on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. And the Lightning Network has very low fees associated with it, and it's very fast. So another thing to know about Western Union is it sometimes can take hours to days for that money to be transferred over for that individual to receive it. And it's often used because in the second and third world countries, they are either underbanked or unbanked because they don't have access to the financial systems we have here in the United States. So once they get that money, it's just carrying around in cash or whatever their local currency is. When you have the Lightning Network and Strike, the individuals often have cell phones overseas, so they have access to a phone. They can download an app. If the individual can put the money on their app and just ship it to them, and it's almost instantaneous, and the fees are significantly lower. This is one of the reasons that El Salvador adopted Bitcoin last year was because they saw that Western Union and these other companies, which were providing a great service for their people, but were doing it at quite a big expense. And that by encouraging the adoption of Bitcoin in their country, they would be able to adopt services like Strike and get money back to their people where they can put the money into their economy versus going to a third party provider. And Strike has recently announced that they're expanding into the Philippines as well. So this is a real life use of Bitcoin and the Lightning Network that we can go use today to send money overseas and to save ourselves and our family members or friends time and money. So crypto is not just something that you read about. It's something that is really coming into its own right now and actually being able to use this idea, use this new technology in ways that benefits humanity and benefits society. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned a little bit more why crypto has a actual future in being used in our daily lives as opposed to just an idea that people hype and go back and forth on trying to make money on as investors. It's more than that. It's actually technology that can improve lives. Well, if you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, please share it with a friend and be sure to tune in next week as we continue our conversation and practicing the tools of learning.
Thank you for listening to Refining Rhetoric with Robert Bortons. Want more? Make sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. You can also follow us on social media to continue the conversation and visit classicalconversations.com/rhetoric to find out how you can join a local homeschool community.